love the poetic refrain, can't, repeated in the first poem, I can't. I love the phrase, the snarl and spit of history. I love that. It's you know, it's a very powerful and succinct way of you know, creating an image. They took your breath. Again, that was so poignant. With the second poem, Vows, all you need is love. That's such a universal phrase. It's lovely, isn't it, to bring it in. And then we are loved completely at the end. You know, and so poignant. And there is a real relationship between the two poems, really, with a call for love. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
I think on those two poems is that, related to one of my questions, is poetry can sometimes be difficult to grasp for the average reader. So, but those two weren't, but still were complex and laden with beauty. So how do you, and this is a question for everybody, and we'll start with Anna, how do you incorporate accessibility into your work, or don't you?
I do. I think once you decide to share your work, to share your poetry, I think you have a responsibility for it to be accessible. And whether that's in the simplicity of the writing, the directness of what you're talking about, or whether it's in the sentiment behind it, the emotion behind it. It's important that it works. Otherwise, to me, it's self-indulgent, really. So in my writing, funnily enough, my writing style, as you will hear, is very direct and very simplistic and accessible. So I don't find myself having to make it easier to listen to. It's inherently there.
Yeah. And Tony, what about for yourself? How do you incorporate accessibility and ease of reading?
I try to make things really direct and vivid, and it's one of the things that I find useful in terms of making things accessible is to have friends who will read what you have written and comment on how accessible they find it, because it's amazing how what you think is really direct and straightforward, that people will interpret it perhaps differently, or not understand it, or think something different. So it is really valuable to have your work looked over by people whose opinions you trust and who you know are good readers, and to tell you how accessible they find it and how they feel about it. So I think that's one of my main routes to accessibility, as well as keeping not using too many long words. I've read one time that Robert Burns is a man for all that, has 54 words and 44 are monosyllables, and monosyllables can be really powerful in poetry. So that's something else I tend to bear in mind.
And Kevin, for yourself?
Sorry, I realised I was on mute.
No.
I think there's something about engaging people, so there has to be a willingness and a readiness to communicate through the poem. And in that sense, I would say accessibility is about that directness. But I also think that there's something about nuance. There's something about the layers and the possibilities of meaning within the poem. And if it's written from a genuine impulse of sharing the wonder of that, then I think it can be accessible over a period. You can sort of settle into the poem and understand things that perhaps you only felt initially. So yeah, I would echo what people have said. I do struggle with poems where I feel I need a glossary of terms beside me in order to even take in a couple of the words that hit me in the first line.
And Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it's not only do you write for yourself, you write for the person in the room who needs to hear it. So I think, and there's a very old theatre adage, which is if you don't believe what you're saying, get off the stage. Which basically, if you're not, if you're saying something you don't believe in, or you're performing something that is you're not giving your all for, what are you doing performing? And I think in terms of accessibility, it's also remember to important that not only how people access your work is written or performed, but also how they access it digitally and other means. So now this is, with everything going on, it's been a great time for people like myself to learn about, for instance, subtitling videos and reaching a new audience, and actually being aware of other audiences who might not necessarily come and see us live or be, the first point of call to our work, but it's important not to exclude anyone where possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a nice lead into your performance for today. So if you'd like to thrill us.
So full disclosure, I have a terrible habit of changing my set last minute, and I was just thinking today, I'd planned to do some quite funny stuff, and it might not be the mood or the tone for that today, so I'm going to see how we get on. But I am going to start with a new piece. So BBC Radio Derby has been commissioning local LGBTQ+ poets to write 60-second pride poems. Mine is being broadcast on Tuesday night, so you're going to get the first play, as it were, here today, and this is called Silence Equals Death. We stand in study from a distance, glimpsing the future through tear gas smoke, fists and voices raised like at the stone wall over 50 years ago. Look around. Is it so different now? Like then, today is not a time for silence. Change will take more than hashtags. We need better education, more acceptance, even for the things you may not fully understand. There's no shame in not knowing, as long as you're willing to learn. Thank you.
Very nice. That was lovely. So Kevin, let's start with yourself. Your reactions to that.
I always loved Dan's poems because they have a kind of punch in a velvet glove. And that one had exactly the same, that sense of being in the very ordinary world and then being hit by the line, today is not a time for silence. And the instant linking back to the HIV/AIDS time and the t-shirts, silence equals death, was immediately in my mind, and how powerful it is to remind us that by being silent, that can be taken as agreement with things which we are fiercely opposed to. So yeah, very powerful, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the point, isn't it? Silence is also a stance, effectively. So Anna, what about your reaction to that? How did it impact yourself? Anna, muted. Hang on. You're muted, Anna. There we go.
Just like Kevin, I picked out the phrase, like then, today is not a time for silence. It's funny that both Kevin and I heard that. I think one of the brilliant roles of poetry is to find words when words are difficult to find, and to be a call to action, a call to arms. And I think that that's very much a good example of that. There are, perhaps music in the same way can evoke that impulse and agency. But I loved your words, and I love that, that the BBC are doing that. That's great.
And
yeah, I wasn't sure they were going to accept it because it's obviously quite political, but they're really happy with it. This is great, because I was a bit concerned they weren't going to accept it, but they love it, and I'd be very appreciative for all the support they've given it. So it'll be out on Tuesday night.
Okay. And Tony, your thoughts?
Yes, that title, Silence and Equals Death, that it was so resonant throughout the time when people were campaigning during the HIV/AIDS period. But also, of course, it affects what you, Nicci, were saying right at the beginning. The silence is not enough at this time. That however carefully we speak or we act, silence is not acceptable, and we have to find ways of acting. So I thought it was very relevant, and it was punchy and resonant, and had a considerable impact. Yes, I very much appreciated it.
And along the lines of getting kind of three other poets' feedback on the work you write, there's a quote by Antonio Porchai, as an Argentinian poet. I know what I have given you. I do not know what you have received. And do you trust that your work can be interpreted as you want it to be, as you intended that message to be received?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll start with you, Dan.
I was going to say, I think that because my background is very much kind of comedy and performance. So, you know, I have got a book. I was saying the same thing to Big White Shed yesterday. The hardest part for me when the book was published was kind of releasing the words, because for me it was very much about, you know, if you want to see the poem, you want to come and see the show, you come and see the show. And I think the thing I learned very early doors, getting more into poetry, is you can say the same words night after night for 6 weeks, but everybody's going to hear it differently and react to it differently. And that's fine. You know, I think that the hardest part for me having the book was saying, right, okay, this is what I've come up with, and now it's yours. And I know for a fact that everybody who's read it has picked, as you've done today, picked up on something different, picked up on a different phrase or a different line. And I love the fact that my work can be interpreted in so many different ways and start conversations as we're doing today.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. And Kevin, in terms of, you know, when you put your work out there and you know what you're trying to say, is there a certain anticipation in how it's going to be received?
Yeah, I think it's one of the great things for all poets, particularly performance poets, is that sense of what will be received and a willingness to be surprised by that. I've learned not to be too controlling. And initially, I think I did try to be quite controlling as a way of protecting myself. But then I realized that actually the poems were more powerful the less I tried to do that. So what was coming across to people was just that level of personal insight that was going to engage them more in the rest of the poetry. And for me, that's the magic of poetry.
And Anna, when you release a poem, you've got it in your head exactly what it means. Are you surprised when somebody comes back to you and says, "Oh, this touched me in this way. I found this meaning in there. Oh, I got this from that." And you're like, "Oh," or do you know? How does that feel?
I think I tend to touch on subjects which have, or hopefully have a universal quality to it: love, unrequited love, a person's sense of feeling invisible. So my subjects lend themselves to hopefully reaching out to people. I think as a writer, one of the things I've had to find peace with is understanding that when I've written my piece of work, it's over to then. I've done my job. I have to trust in my work and let it go, and that's the right way. And I love that, you know, like Dan, I love the fact that other people will take different things from it. I think that's a really positive thing. So yes, just remembering that I'm the writer. That's my job. So yeah.
And Tony, for yourself, how do you kind of reconcile that responsibility as a writer to comment socially, but then how that's received?
Yes and no. Yeah, it is. There is the point of commenting socially, but sometimes there have been times when I've thought that somebody is reading a poem to me, and yeah, it's a really important political statement, but they really need to go out and campaign. I really try to say something in a poem which has a personal connection, where I'm not just saying something that I might say in support of a particular political thing at a political meeting, but I go deeper into something that has a real, I hope, sort of emotional resonance with the audience. You know, some of my poems are quite personal and political, but some don't even have any. Well, quite a lot of the poems I write don't have an evident gay connection. Some do and some don't. But it depends on what I'm writing about at the time and the enthusiasm that I'm writing about at the time. But I think it is important to have enthusiasm about whatever you're writing about, and to convey that. That makes it more accessible. Yeah, you have to be aware of your audience as well and what you're doing for them. And you're taking up some of their time. And so you are trying to provide them with something which they will cherish afterwards, you hope, and which will be helpful to them, but also will perhaps make them think about their relation to both themselves and others.
Yeah, super. Okay.
I would just add that for me, I think art generally is a kind of catalyst, and exactly what it catalyzes is very much down to the individual. I think it's the creator, though, that puts that spark that creates the catalyzing effect.
Okay, so I've got a question, and I'm going to direct this to Anna. How difficult is it to get your work out to the public and to get it heard?
I was quite fortunate in that I began my poetry writing to be published with the University of Leicester. So I was already within that framework. My first poem, which I'll read in a bit, is On Reflection. That was part of the University of Leicester's Writing Lives project, and they produced a pamphlet with that. So that's a great tip, actually, is to align yourself with fantastic university departments who are doing brilliant projects. Also, I think open mic nights are brilliant. They're a physical way of getting in front of a microphone. Now we have the social media, our groups. We can help each other online. In Leicester, we have Shindig, Ping, House of Verse. They're brilliant. I think as well, in terms of thinking about publishing your work, you might, if you have a particular poet who is published, whose work has a symmetry to yours, or you enjoy it, have a little look at who publishes them. So I think, from my point of view, the prospect of being published or trying to get published doesn't intimidate me, because there are various really fruitful avenues. But social media, Instagram poets, that's an excellent way of being able to put your work out there and share it in a very sort of equitable way. And I love that. So today I think it's poetry has a real sense of momentum. I don't know what you guys think, but it's a good time for poetry. It's exciting.
Lovely. Very nice answer. So this question, does the message always come in the form of the poem, or is it more complicated? Tony, I'm going to direct that question to you.
I was hoping you wouldn't. Yes, there's a question. I think it's that question thinking that perhaps it's afterwards when you reflect that the message actually comes through, and that can be the case. Yes, you think you have an initial impact, and you think you know what the poem has said first time, and some poems do need to be heard repeatedly or read repeatedly before the message properly comes in. But there should be something that is communicated and something that is felt immediately, I think, as well as more that may appear as you think about it afterwards. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. I think it does. So Anna, you mentioned you were going to read a poem called Reflection, I think you said.
That's right. Nick, what I thought I'd do with my 8 minutes is split it into 2 blocks of 4. Okay. And I'll squeeze in 2 short poems in my first block of 4. And then in my second block, I'd like to introduce a technique which has blown my mind called found poetry. So each of the 2 short poems I'm about to read now are under a minute each. The first one is On Reflection, and it's about falling in love with a girl at university and making a tit of myself. And realizing later in life that it's okay, and getting some perspective. So here we go, On Reflection. If we were to meet again, I would say sorry today for then, when mad with love, deranged with passion, all reason astray, I cried I love you. 3 words, not enough. So I left flowers to water your door, composed mixed tapes, wrote odes, baked cakes, your name on my lips, in my brain. Be mine, I implored. As I failed exams, missed deadlines, endured pain. I lost sleep, got sick, felt weak, refused to see sense, still convinced that you could be mine. And through it all, silent, wise and kind, you knew the one answer for me would be time. You were so gentle with your rejection. Yes, I can see that now. on reflection. My second poem is on the very lofty subject matter of when I clipped my hair. And one of the lovely things about poetry is it can capture an emotional moment in a way I think no other art form perhaps can. So here we go. Today I shaved my hair off. Today I shaved my hair off. To see me, to know me, to own me, to free me, to be me. Today I shaved my hair off. To breathe, to see fermenting the fuck you I should have said long ago to every fucker who kept me small, and fuck me for letting you all. Today I shave my hair off. Is this what confidence is? Is self-esteem the glance you give that says, get your hands off my soul? The tone of voice that holds steady and loud and clear. I'm speaking now, you'll damn well hear. Today I shave my hair off. You see me now, don't you? You hear me now, don't you? You'll feel me now, won't you? Today I shave my hair off. You might want to, too.
Very nice.
Rebellion.
Kevin, would you like to tell us about how that impacted on you, those two poems?
Delightful, thank you, Anna. I see at once what you were talking about with a directness and a simplicity, and you dance beautifully between simplicity and intensity. I love the phrase, I wrote it down here, flowers to water your door in On Reflection. And then in the second poem, a really beautiful statement, get your hands off my soul, which might sound simple. You could write those words down and you think, oh, they're very straightforward. But actually thinking of that as something that you might say to somebody comes across to me as a tremendous act of empowerment. And I take a kind of fierce passion from your poetry, which I really, really love.
Yeah, it was beautiful. That line that you've just said with the soul, get your hands off my soul. It was just like, oh, it was one of those lines that you read and go, oh, or you hear it and it's like, oh, that's lovely. One of those lines you kind of wish you'd written. Very nice. And Dan, what about you? What did you think?
Yeah, again, beautiful. So one of the things I love about poetry is just I feel like I know a glimpse of you now. And it's the only art form I feel you get that direct gut punch of a glimpse. I love the line in the first piece. Was it your name on my lips and your name in my brain or something? I'm going to butcher that. I apologize, but I love that. And again, the second one, I feel like I have a glimpse of you and I like it and I'd love to hear more. And yeah, I kind of just wish I was sat there with a glass or something clicking along. That's what I want to be doing today, so.
I think because we've not yet heard Tony perform, but I've been to a couple of Tony's readings before, so I know how he does that. And what's come out for me from this is the very different styles that everybody has of how they perform their words. And I suppose my question for you is how does that come to you naturally? Or is that something you discover as you find your voice within your poems? Does it change depending on whether you're doing something, on the kind of poem you're writing, or do you have a stock way of delivering that's come to you naturally or that you've developed? And I'll start with you, Tony.
Well, I love those two poems, and we're all vulnerable, and one of the things that poetry can do is bring us very close to the vulnerability of the poet, and both the shaving of the head and the idea of we all feel rejection, and they both brought us really close to the writer and close to our own feelings wonderfully. You were asking about something about
how your performing style came about, whether it was something that just came naturally, whether it comes naturally, whether it differs from poem to poem, or something you had to work on.
I think it is something which developed over time. I think the fact that I taught for many years, and so I had to talk to a substantial number of people and get their attention. I feel, but in my early days, I was a fairly introvert teenager. I was very nervous when I first started teaching, and I tend to think when I'm performing that really that people want to hear. They want to experience something, and give it to them. They don't want a retreating a tortoise retreating into its shell. That's not what they want. They want to hear it. They want to enjoy it. This is what is needed, and therefore give them what they want. So that's what I try to do, and also to also bring them in, to make them feel that they have been touched, that they know me better after I've read it. Although sometimes some of the poems and some of the ones I'm thinking of reading in a moment may not seem to be specifically about me. Some of them are more personal, but these may not. Well, they are and they aren't. Yeah, I do think that it's developed over the years. I've had plenty of years to develop it.
And I think that's really important. We talked about accessibility earlier on in the panel, and I think the way a poet delivers their work really keys into that accessibility. Because if it's exciting, you can get caught up in the cadence of the delivery and the power that you and the passion that you're projecting when you speak in your words, which is something from all four of you, very different styles, but really draw you in. And I think that's something that brings poetry to life, rather than people thinking, oh, I'm not interested in poems. And having a panel like this with great poets and performers like yourselves really highlights that actually poetry is a really exciting medium, which is brilliant. Anna, what about yourself? How about how did your performance style come about?
Well, I think certainly, obviously, when I work with Bolter Books, Nick, as a novelist, and having to read aloud, it teaches you really, as Tony was saying, to give it, to sock it to them, to give it to them. Certainly for me, it's that confidence that you gain through performing, to speak up and feel proud. I think to be proud of your work. In terms of, I'm quite an emotional reader of my work, and I feel it. So when I read it, I really feel it in my heart, and I can feel my sort of chest and swelling, if you like. I almost find it hard not to almost feel a little bit teary. It's all almost like that. So I'm very engaged when I read, and that's an instinctive thing, rather than something I've developed.
And Dan, how about because you've got I've seen your videos, and you've performed at festivals, so that's a very different kind of medium. And then your performance today was a very different style, I find. So how about your performance style?
Yeah, I mean, no one ever believes me, but I'm quite a shy, insecure person, believe it or not. And poetry really helped me sort of get over that. But I think the thing I found when I started, because my background's comedy, I was very much, I'm gonna get the laugh, because if they laugh, they're enjoying it. So I've not got to worry, because if they laugh, they've got it. And I was going to be, Frankie Boyle, Bill Hicks a couple of years ago. And that's, I've said before many times on similar platforms, the reason I wear a black shirt and a jacket on stage is because that's the closest I'm going to get to being Bill Hicks in my life. That's it. That's the only reason, I used to wear no shoes to be like Tim Minchin, black jacket, Bill Hicks. That was it. But the thing I found is as much as I enjoy the comedy side of stuff, and I'm probably more of a comic than a poet, dare I say. Still genre fluid, of course, but dare I say, probably more of a comic than a poet. But as much as I enjoy making people laugh, and I always have done in everything I've done as a performer, the more special and important thing for me is making them think. So humor is a great way of getting people engaged and getting people on board with what you're saying. But for me, I think what I've tried to do in my work is use humor to kind of de-guard people and get us all kind of relaxed, and then bleed into the more serious topics that I actually want to discuss, because I would rather make one person think than 20 people belly laugh. And the reason I do festivals, fringes, because I'm quite passionate about my work being heard by people who may not want, or not want, but may not automatically access it. I am, as much as I hate labels, I'm an LGBTQ plus poet, and with no negativity and no offense intended, there are certain people who might go, oh, that's not for me because of what it is. And I like to try and find audiences where I go, actually, it might be. If you listen to it, you might actually really like it, or it might make you think. So I think I've tried to develop a style which is a performance. You know, I remember someone saying to me, I really like your stage persona. I was like, I don't have one. I was like, you know, you do. And of course I do. We all do. Everyone on stage has one. Whether you admit it or not, you don't have one. You do have one. But I think for me, it's come from, you know, rehearsal and just having the confidence in my own work, as Anna mentioned, and also just wanting to do it, you know, wanting to stand there and go, right, I have something to say. I hope it will help someone, so I'm going to say it regardless. Yeah. And if they don't like it, they can always switch off or go on the phone or turn my YouTube off. So it's, I like a challenge, put it that way.
Lovely. And Kevin, your poems are always your performance is always very thoughtful, and I find it always draws me in, and I find myself almost holding my breath for the entire time you're reading, which can be quite difficult when they're longer poems, and breathe and then stop breathing again. Is that something that came naturally to you, the way you deliver your poems?
Such an interesting topic. I don't know that I ever thought it through. Looking back on it, I think what happened was I learnt to trust the poems, and I learnt to work on assumption that people wanted to hear them. And so my job really was to be a bridge, to take what was on the page and touch each person who is in the space listening. And I find that the more I just approached it in that very simple way, in the same way I would if I was having a conversation with you, or if I was having a conversation with somebody in a queue for the chip shop, I would want to know that they'd heard what I'd said. And I would also be willing to listen, even though they might not actually say anything, but their body language, their eye contact. There's a quality when you're sharing poetry with an audience that's really receptive, which is so beautiful. It's so responsive that you want to offer the poem more into those spaces. And so you learn to create that kind of receptivity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are running out of time. So what I want to do is, Tony, for you to read your poem. And then unfortunately, I didn't start the recording until after, Kevin, you'd done your two poems. So if it's possible for Tony to do yours, and then Kevin, if you could do your initial one again, that would be brilliant. That's okay. So I'm sorry about that, Anna, for the preparation you've done on that.
We could save it for another time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll definitely be doing this again. So Tony, if you'd like to read one of your poems out for us. Oh, he's muted.
I'll be thinking back to, probably because I'm aged, thinking back to the past. And this is thinking about an experience I had when I was quite small and had a big brother who was 7, 8 years older than me, who had a great enthusiasm. And for what you'll see, even though it won't be part of the life of most of the listeners, I called it Relics and Youth. Bones, mesmerizing bones. Crackle knuckle, tick tick, skiffle bones played with the rhythm of a firm wrist and frantic fingers. My eyes were stone still as I watched, saw the fingers rotate, and bones get their comeuppance as big brother's digits brandished a knife drawer of bones and set them tip-tocking, such that shoulders wanted to shove the air away and hips to shake in time with the snap of the bones. Here is the dream of the rock-smashed jailhouse. Here is the dream of the flight of Lonnie Donegan's express train. Here is the dream of sun and beach and a forbidden holiday. But for now, here are the lock-wide eyes. The gaze wanting to merge with these old white sticks, to inhabit the energy of their life in death, to be with them in the moment, and hip and bopping. And then I was wanting to read one which goes back even further, really, as you'll see, before my time. But I've always liked dramatic monologues, and always liked the idea of getting inside the minds of others. And I've called this one Speechless. She stands in the doorway of her farmhouse. Her fingers distress her apron. No letter for a month. But hey, Jessie, she got 3 months' letters together last week. And the postman, standing beyond her farmyard, pulls down the edge of his grey moustache, and her heart is an anvil waiting. A little smile, a thumbs up from him, a brushing across of his hands. At least nothing bad. No telegram today. She closes her eyes. She sees her son in his new uniform, its fresh smell, its firm look, but how easily she made him wince when she prodded it. No matter how he seemed strong as he took hold and kissed her. She sees him without epaulets. She sees him taking his first steps. She would have him walking home here now, then hauling the dray, clearing swill, anything but where he is. She thinks to call herself a coward, a traitor. No news is not the worst news. Silence lies across the landscape. She is glad not to have heard the hated apology, is glad for the silence.
Beautiful. Very nice. Just one quick question, Anna. Is somebody's asked where we can find your brilliant poems?
Oh, lovely. Thank you for your lovely question. On Reflection is in the Kenrick anthology, I Want to Tell You How, and also in the University of Leicester's Centre for New Writing, the Writing Lives Together project pamphlet. The clipping of my hair, at the minute, it's unpublished, it's with me, but there's a strong possibility it might push onto my website. And if that's the case, it'll be www.annalarner.com.
That's super. Okay, so we are running out of time, unfortunately. I want to ask the audience if, and let me see if I can do this. What I want to pass on is a survey, but I don't think I'm going to be able to find that without doing it. So never mind. If you've got your Internet Explorer open, when you close this, a survey link will pop up, but I'll also be forwarding it to your emails for those that attended. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for my fabulous panelists. I mean, the reason I wanted to include a poetry panel in this literature festival today was to really bring up the profile of it, if you will, and really get people to understand that they can connect with poems just as easily as they can connect with prose, if not more so, particularly when it's performed so brilliantly by everybody here. So that is the end. Thank you very much. We've got another 3 panels going on at 4, 6 and 7. And then at 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock, we've got the after party where all the authors and poets and performers are going to be. And we can have breakout rooms where you can chat individually with those authors and performers and poets, or in smaller groups. So that's going to be absolutely fabulous. As I say, if the survey comes up, which I'm hoping it will, if you could answer, that would be fantastic. So that is the end of it. But Kevin, if you could just hang around for a moment and just repeat your performance for me, that would be awesome. And thank you very much to all the panelists and to the people watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, go for it, Kevin.
Okay, so the poem is called Black Lives Matter. And I'll just say before I read it, 2 things. For me, art is activism and hope is activism. We can all do those things. Black Lives Matter. I can't breathe under this weight of hate. Can't break free where only white is right. Can't speak out where justice calls meet riot shield walls. Can't see how our one world split apart can heal till we let hearts feel the snarl and spit of history. Honestly face our race history. Sit down together, hearts open, hearts strong, listen hard together, listen long, weep for the hurt we've done, still do. Tell the false leaders we see you, see the blood on your hands, see how divided we stay weak, you stay strong, and that's not right, that's what's wrong. Stand up together now, hearts stout, hearts true, shout out together now for our days in view. They took your breath, but now we breathe as one. This land is our land. The freedom fight's begun.
It's lovely. No less powerful the second time of hearing it so close together. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you all in the after party breakout this evening from 8 o'clock onwards. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.